I'm sure that up till now, the day that we've all spent has been truly definitive and concrete in many of our experts who have spoken to you. Now, with this, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be changing gears slightly. We'll be changing gears and getting into something more precise. Because you see, the next topic that we want to talk about is acceleration adoption of precision diagnostics in India. We'll be talking about how precision diagnostics is becoming a cornerstone for early detection, targeted therapy, and improved patient outcomes at the same time. Now, this is a topic which truly demands a robust policy framework, ecosystem collaboration, and an on-ground implementation strategy. So it has to be a cohesive environment, a cohesive workforce towards this that we want to talk about. Now, we'll be getting into a panel discussion also on the same topic. However, before we get into this panel discussion, I wish to welcome on stage Dr. Sridhar Sivasubbu, who is the Chief Diagnostic and Research Officer at Karkinos Healthcare, to kindly please step up onto the stage and make his presentation before I would also be encouraging him to moderate the panel later on. But right now, welcome, sir. Thank you so much. Please join me.
A very good afternoon to all of you, and thank you for the kind introductions, and thank you to the organizers for putting together this fantastic gathering of elite members of the industry. Without further taking too much of your time, let me spend the next 7 to 10 minutes on just giving you a very broad perspective, which most of you would already be aware about. What are the challenges and way forwards for precision diagnostics in India? But before I start my session, I was really truly impressed with the last panel, because they kind of set the stage to what we are going to talk about, me and my panelist who will be here for the next 45 minutes doing that. But with that, let me see if I can get this to work. Yeah. So I have 4 large areas that I'll be touching upon. Why do we need precision diagnostics when we have this fantastic current way of diagnosing diseases and doing? Is there something that we need to gain? And of course, I think I'll be able to convince you. What are the current landscapes and challenges and opportunities, as well as some strategic recommendations, which I will let my panel sort of deliberate more upon. So in terms of looking at why do we need precision diagnostics? I think the most important stuff is there is an increased demand. But who is demanding them? Both clinicians as well as patients. Both have demanding it in a very common voice, because they want to increase the standard of care that's out there. Okay? And second, there's also a lot of, you'll see later in the presentation, how a lot of the therapies in oncology specifically and in other genetic diseases are getting targeted. So again, that's a very, very important point for us to consider, because it's not a generalistic medication, it's a targeted therapy is becoming the norm nowadays. And third, of course, we have a lot of new generation labs that have come up, and they are ready to take the challenge of building these tests. Other is increased utilization of biomarkers that we saw the last panel debate about it. They debated a lot about this $100 genome, but I have a question for every one of you. Okay. Unanimously, we sort of agreed that we are not there yet. But how many of you think, or when do you think we will be there for that famous $100 genome? Just a raise of hands. Maybe next 5 years, next 10 years. 10 years. Okay. What do you think is the current standard in the world? Let's say 1,000, 500, no 100. Let's say 1,000. How many of you are at 1,000? I think majority will be. $500 a genome? Okay. When 100, all of us agreed we are not there yet. Okay. I'll come back to the answer a little bit later on what's happening, but I'll keep that as a suspense. Also, there is improved access for using genome sequencing for clinical utility. That's the other reason why biomarkers are getting famous, because you're able to go from a generalized biomarker to a very specific protein or a very specific nucleotide, very specific gene, and then have its readout. and use that in your diagnosis. Third, the complexity of the biomarkers have changed. They are not single biomarkers. Now you're looking at a scale of biomarkers, a panel of biomarkers. There could be a few to a few thousands that collectively put together the disease prognosis or the outcomes of the patient. And of course, we debated about AI and its utilization, which is eminent. So that will hopefully make life easier. But first it will make it difficult and then make it easier is my prediction. Of course, there's disruptive technologies that are really coming up on the horizons, be it liquid biopsy or AI-enabled detection tools. And this will, in the short term, cause some heartburns, but in the long term, be really useful in making the field one of the greatest in terms of technology. So what really are biomarkers? Biomarkers are largely, I'm not going to read from the slide, but largely parts of what our cells make, proteins, DNA, RNA, sometimes metabolites, anything that you can take from a patient, be able to measure it and be able to associate it with a disease condition and be able to, with a very high degree of accuracy, say that this represents a particular therapy or represents a prognostic marker or a diagnostic marker, and those are all considered as biomarkers. And in cancer, they have found a very, very strong foothold. Now, in terms of cancer, if you looked at targeted therapies, I said I will come back to it later. If you see, in the Americas, about 71% of the FDA-approved targeted therapies, okay, all targeted therapies are, 71% of all the therapies that are approved are targeted therapies. Same with the Europe, okay, about 66% of all new drugs are targeted. So clearly, the biomarker way of getting into targeted therapies is gaining popularity as well as adoption. And that's the number. So now with India, not so, I'll come back to the Indian a little bit later, but what exactly are people doing in the clinical side and the data side? They're trying to integrate a lot of stuff, be demographics, patient profile, population level evidences, outcomes, and reports from the cellular products that our patients make into getting into better prognosis, understanding the patient better, understanding the disease better, largely coming to better patient outcomes. And that's all we are trying to do and sort of help the physicians make a decision faster and more accurate. So the current landscape, if you see in terms of precision diagnostics in our market potential around the world, okay, that has really taken a lot of, it's on the upward trajectory. That's all I would say. But most important point in this slide, if you really notice, the fastest growing market is Asia Pacific. So that's what I would like you to remember, that precision diagnosis has taken a foothold in the Asia Pacific and is here to stay. Now, if I were to look at India, India is not too far behind, but the volumes could really be better than this. Okay, from a $550 million market, it could be much, much better. It is growing at a decent rate, but I know there is a lot of scope and scale, and people are looking at not only India, the Southeast Asia as the next big destination for precision medicine, because of the sheer diversity that we carry in terms of people. No two people in this room really look alike, or we are so much different. So we all have slightly differences in how we respond to many of the drugs or therapies. But the key driver in this whole business is going to be how do you sequence either parts of the genome or a couple of genes or the whole genome. And India has sort of started very early in 2008, but then we sort of lost our way. So, and we are somewhere there, but all of them are right steps we have taken. We have sort of increased our genome sequencing presence in the hospitals. We have increased our footprints in the diagnostic labs. This year alone, I was yesterday looking at how many new diagnostic centers have really stepped up into high throughput genomics. That's an impressive number, really, at least in the last 3 months. India has very specific data sets now put in. We have the Genome India, now we have the Bharat Cancer Genome Atlas, we have the tribal genomics, many, half a dozen of such very good initiatives and a very good growth potential. But if you look at where is this market really going to grow, I already gave you the answer. Asia Pacific is the highest growth that we see, followed by the Europe and the Africas. And the same goes for looking at who benefits or who participates the most. Looks to be largely about clinical laboratories and hospitals take the lion's share of it. If you looked at the proficiency testing, which comes hand in hand with something as advanced technologies, without this probably the precision diagnostic would not be really as trusted as it is. Okay. Again, you can see laboratories, hospitals really stepping up the game, and large part of it coming to our part of the world. I think that's an encouraging trend. But finally, its precision diagnosis is not about a single gene. It has evolved from a single gene, single marker to multi-genes to now largely about anywhere between 500 to 1,000 gene panels to multi-cancer detection panels to whole genome sequencing to whole transcriptome sequencing, exome sequencing. All of these have really scaled up very nicely and poised for a transition. So what does all this tell us? All this tells us is that if you put all of them together, and with the kind of data sciences that is coming up, we will be able to integrate. And that's the challenge, biggest challenge that probably in the next few years we'll really have to address. So the current challenges, this is not few years, currently, right now, I think awareness is one of the biggest missing gaps. Both patient, clinician, as well as the large scientific body. Okay, there's a lot of literature, but converting it into awareness is the challenge. Adoption is the next challenge, which I think is a little bit addressable given the kind of diagnostic ecosystem that we have in our country and the history behind it. I think they are good to go. Access, availability, and accuracy, we talked about it. So these are the current challenges. Of course, in terms of precision diagnostics and histopathology, if you add up, there are challenges in the field, but I'm optimistic about it. I'm not really saying that we have lost everything. I think we have very good training, very good labs, but how do you build upon it? How do you make sure that they're all turning out the same kind of data, the same reagents, with the same quality of evidence? That's the challenge. So trainings, automation, and certifications and audits are going to be fundamental. The same goes for NGS. Okay, there are about 18 NGS providers. There are roughly about TAT of about 20 days. But problem is not with the machines. It's going to be how do you have equitable access? Most of them you will see are in metros. What is the work pipelines that they use, both in the lab and as well as the bioinformatics? How do you assure quality? These need to be controlled very strongly. Way forward, I just have one slide. Okay. How do you ensure that we go forward, which I will sort of not really force my, I'll not really go about this, but I have my panel, which is, you can introduce the panel, please, because I think it will be better if they kind of deliberated upon this and come to what I have sort of written down on how do you expand access, how do you strengthen quality, how do you build a very strong workforce, how do you make it interoperable, how do you bring about policy changes? Because all of this doesn't make sense if there are not adequate policies to go hand in hand. How do you innovate on top of all of this? So I'll let my panel take over from here onwards and invite members of my panel. Please, if you could introduce them.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Sridhar.
So, sir, we invite you to sit back.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I'll wait for the panel.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.